All right, so today we're going to talk about the ever so important topic of soils. You can see behind me here, I've got 300 yards of parent material that grew North America's largest pumpkin last year. Okay, kind of neat. This is complete sand. And if you were to ask 98% of the growers why they like sand, it'd be pretty simple. Answer is it drains well. It also is easily able to be modified. Okay, we can modify this a lot easier than we can modify clay, for example. And then it also doesn't really compact like clay does when it gets wet. You can kind of see that it crumbles and it's fine. You know, on golf courses, they use 80% sand, 20% peat. Okay, just much like our garden. Now, when people ask me, what was it for you? What was it for you? What helped you grow? You know, what keys can you give us? It was focus on your soil. Do we really want to start out with like a 4-cylinder engine in a race car, or do we want to start out with the 12-cylinder, okay? We totally want the 12-cylinder, okay? Then we can modify with our fertilizers, which might be in the car world, a K&N system or a turbo or an exhaust system, okay? That's our fertilizers. We want to be able to modify that way. So how do we get from this to this? You can even feel this, it's actually kind of warm. We actually have the soil horizons right under my garden because we're digging a huge addition right next to my garden. It actually goes into my garden. But you can see parent material sand, okay? Up here we have the A horizon right here, nice kind of black layer. Up top would be your humus or organic layer if you had grass on top, and then it slowly filters down into the parent material. But you can kind of see all these different layers. What I do is I want to mix them up, not necessarily just for the roots or drainage. It's basically to not create a perched water table. When you watch water flow through soil, okay, it basically takes whatever layers are there and it spreads out a little bit throughout the layers, and it goes horizontally versus vertically. If you ever want just really cool video on how water moves through the soil, Google soil water movement. And this soil water movement, I invite you to guess what happens every single time. But as the soil changes, the water flows differently through different sources, okay? And with that being said, most of the time you're wrong when you start guessing how the water is going to move through these layers. And that's, simply put, that's one of the reasons why I like to mix these layers as deep as possible. Not just because of roots, but more for drainage, more for soil water movement. Let's say, for example, we're going to start a new garden. What do? The first thing we're going to want to do is take a soil sample. And there's a million videos out there on soil sampling, so I'm really not going to get into it. But you take a soil probe like this, take and spin it down into the ground, pull it out. You can see your layers right there. You can break off the top organic part with the roots and throw this into a bucket. And then you've got 8 to 10 of these, throw them into a bag, and you can send them into the lab, Midwest Labs, Western Laboratories, different testing facilities will tell you what is in your soil. Let's talk about the 3 parts of soil, one of which we can probably only see today. The other 2 we cannot. So the first part is soil structure. What did our soil come from? Did it come from the sand? Did it come from clay? And when we look at soil structures, what is it made up of? Okay, you can see some vermiculite, some perlite, some leaves, grass, but nice dark material. Looks good, feels good, just feels nice and earthy. That's what we want. We want that. That's soil structure. Now for the second part, a lot of you focus on this, which is the chemical composition. You dial in your little soil calculator, you get your soil report back, it says, oh, I'm lacking some phosphorus, I'm lacking some potassium, some nitrogen, calcium, whatever it is. And we dial in our little soil calculator to the Langley Soil Estimator online, and we can kind of tell what we need to add. And a lot of people get caught up on it. You know, what are the exact amounts to add here and there? And really what happens is you get caught up in it, and it's not an exact science, but we do want certain ratios. And we could spend a whole semester or year talking about soils and never get there. But my recommendation, get your soil report back, ask someone about the soil report. What do you think it needs? What am I lacking? What should I add? And you'll get a lot of different answers. You really will. And then the third part is the biological. So the living organisms within the soil that we may or may not be able to see. You know, if I dug my hand in and I found an earthworm, that might be something, okay? Or if we see an arthropod or a shredder, all the way down to fungi and bacteria. Little millions of bacteria are in the soil. That's actually a really, really critical part to soil health. So I often get asked, what do I do for soil prep? What did I do this year? All right, well, we got all of our amendments in. This morning, the ground was completely frozen at about 30 degrees, but we just went and sprinkled out all of our amendments from kelp meal to perlite to vermiculite. We spread it all out, and now we're gonna till it all in. And then we also added some borax for some boron. That's the only thing the turkey manure does not have. So now I'm gonna show you how I start turning over my soil. Check this out. Well, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of my background of this place. Moved in, had a pumpkin measuring about 1,554 pounds, weighed light first year. Second year, didn't do much modification, grew like 1,100 pounder. Third year, I'm like, all right, we got to change. Something's got to change. We got to give back to the soil. We got to give back what we took. So added just a ton of leaves and grass, some turkey manure, some other minor amendments. Boom, right out of the gate, 1,800 pounder was grown. Awesome, now I'm cooking. Did the same exact thing last season. Very minor amendments, turkey manure, leaves, grass, and my soil was looking good. It was looking great. Well, obviously it did. It grew great pumpkin, okay? Now this year, I talked to quite a few different experts. I analyzed myself too, and I was 98% on board with just very, very, very minor adjustments. And at the last minute, I went on and I hauled some turkey manure in. I did not put it as heavy as I usually do, but you know, turkey manure is one of those things, it has everything. It has almost everything besides boron. And if you ask anyone why turkey manure is good, it's one of the best decomposers out there. Ask a turkey farmer. One of the best decomposers out there. It's hot. It can break down everything. It can be too hot. Less is more on something like that. For a garden of this size, maybe a few yards, 4 yards. I used 4 yards this year. In the past, I was using 7 or 8. My numbers should have been off the chart. They really weren't, because I had so much leaves and grass that were taking from that nitrogen. But what happens over time is you get a buildup of phosphorus in your soil if you're just using nothing but manure. So that's why we don't want to do that. But instead of doing all the little trace elements, which I feel is easier to modify your soil to the exact calculator, doing it that way versus just adding manure, okay? We don't know exactly what we're putting in, but I know enough to be dangerous, and I know that my soil is good. So this is turkey manure, okay? Most people think it's like, oh, it looks like this is turkey manure. Why do I like it? It's light and airy. Notice, I mean, how light that is. People think it's like super heavy. This is really light, airy stuff. Also great for your soil structure, not only the chemical background, but the chemical background of this, a lot of nitrogen, good amount of phosphorus, potassium, calcium, all your micronutrients right in one. The only thing it doesn't have, like I said, is boron, okay? But this can also break down a lot of those leaves and grass, a lot of the organic matter if you use a cover crop. I don't use a cover crop here because, frankly, we don't have enough time to use a cover crop. By the time I'm getting back from California, I had 1 week to dig up my garden, get the vines out, and that was it. I grow 2 plants in about a 1,400 square foot area, maybe 1,300, but I let it grow outside of it as well. If it's doing well, maybe I'll go outside the wind fence. There's not a wind fence yet, you'll see that later. Why do I like leaves and grass? Why do I like leaves and grass? Well, simply because it creates pore space within your soil. Also, when it breaks down the carbon to nitrogen, we can give nitrogen back to the soil. Right away, we're not giving it to the soil. But once it breaks down with all your microbial activity, you will give nitrogen back to the soil. So that was one of my keys in making this garden turn from this yellow sand into this darker, rich material here.
What's that little piece right there, Trev?
Oh, so this wonderful thing starts out as a green alfalfa pellet. A lot of people use alfalfa meal, but what this does is it gives back some nitrogen to the soil. Now, wouldn't you say, well, you added some turkey manure, isn't that enough nitrogen? It probably is, but with the soil being so cold early in the season, I figured why not add some alfalfa pellets, give me a little bit of early season nitrogen. It doesn't give much, but also I like the alfalfa pellets, light and airy, breaking up that soil. Versus dumping a meal on, it's just a powder, hard to spread. These pellets are awesome. These little alfalfa pellets kind of remind me of a catkin seed from a birch tree. Most potting soils actually contain 3 different components: perlite, vermiculite, and peat moss. I'll talk to you just briefly about these 3 elements here, or minerals. This is sphagnum peat moss. Most people don't know, but this is actually vacuumed up off the earth. It comes from decaying dead plant matter. Very light, very airy, holds 26 times its weight dry. So say if you had 1,000 pounds of dry material here, you could have 26,000 pounds of water it could hold. But 1,000 pounds of peat could be, a big bale. But I do see a lot of mistakes with that too. People with clay, they're putting on this peat, all sorts of peat, which is very light. It doesn't compact, but do we really want to hold that much water when we have all this water holding capacity? The other product is perlite, and it's actually a volcanic rock. And it comes in different grades, small, medium, large. This is probably a medium, but you can kind of think of this as styrofoam, but it's actually a volcanic rock. In fact, I grabbed the bag and I threw it at my brother and I said, here, careful, catch, it's a rock. And he's like, wow, this is the lightest stuff ever. What it does, it increases our drainage. A lot of people use this. I used 13 bags on this garden, drop in the bucket. Did I use it last year? No, but I did use it in my planting holes because I like the drainage effect that it gives. So 13 bags for that garden, drop in the bucket, probably $150, $200 at a local nursery or a greenhouse supplier. The third one is vermiculite. You can kind of see the shiny mica. Now this is a very fine vermiculite. Most garden vermiculite would be a lot larger. This stuff is a heated mineral. And when you hear the word vermiculite, like vermiculture, what does it have to do with worms? Well, worms is a worm-like structure. It's heated and it's like an accordion. We can kind of think of it as a sponge. And this is gonna hold water and nutrients. Also allows for some drainage and airiness to the soil, but very, very light. This is a small vermiculite used in seed starting mixes. So I put all my amendments in. I dug it down 30 inches with the rock bucket. Then I went back over and I tilled it with a Bobcat tiller. And this won't be my last tilling, but I just need it to get semi-smoothed out. You've seen all those mounds in the video. Now it's semi-smooth. Now I can go back and re-till once they come out of the greenhouses. So this contest is on Facebook. I don't know that there's a name to this contest. And there's a contest going on right now between me and a couple great Wisconsin growers who have grown a few 2,000 pound pumpkins. Josiah, I think, has 5. Mike has 2. And I, of course, have 1. And there's a contest brewing for the whole season. And what they're doing is they're picking a team, either Team Travis, Team Josiah, or Team Mike. Who do you think will have the biggest pumpkin at the end of the year? And at the end of the year, then you're entered in for contests for all the seeds from our pumpkins, swag, etc. And it's actually really cool. I'm actually quite a bit of underdog right now, but we'll see if I can make it. But these other growers are great. I mean, one grows in the greenhouse. I don't think he is this year. The other grower, first year out, grew a 2,106 pounder, and then he took last year off basically, but the year before grew a 2,261 pounder. So it'll be quite the feat if you can beat these growers, but I think we might all go to certain way offs, or who knows. I don't know where we'll end up or if we even get that far, but it's a cool contest. Go on, and I think you got to register by May 1st to be included, but right now I'm definitely the heavy underdog. We all 3 have YouTube channels in that contest, and it was just a fun way to follow the journeys of everyone this year, so that's why they did the contest. But make sure you follow us on our journey of growing this entire year. And by the way, one tip for people is just get involved with a forum online, whether it be, Facebook groups, but there's a group called Garden of Giants. There's also a group called Backyard Pumpkin Growers. But this Garden of Giants, there's a lot of really good growers. I think we're over 1,000 members right now. If you want any questions answered, from soil to trees to water to you name it, someone will always chime in. Awesome way to get your questions answered super quick. But go to Garden of Giants, become a member, just sign up. They'll approve you. So that's just a little bit into dirt and soils and getting your garden prepped. But basically we want to focus on soil structure, then the chemical element, and the biological that'll start to come right about now as we're putting our plants out. But we really want to focus on our soil. If there's one thing I could give you $500 to do, spend it on your soil. The fertilizing, that can come easy, but without the proper soil, the rest you're just throwing money out the window. So really try and focus on your soil. One thing that's always the hardest for me is getting these plants into the garden. I see so many mistakes with people just waiting and waiting to put them out. Now, if you don't have heat and electricity, that's a whole nother thing. It was 23 degrees last night, but I actually got these plants into their greenhouse and they're starting to take off pretty well. I've got double plastic, 6 mil, so it's 12 mil. I've got grow lights in here, and I've got 2 layers of heating cables underneath, so it's really taken off pretty good. But you can see the plants right there. I've got that 8-ounce non-woven boulder wall fabric, but everything seems to be doing pretty good. These plants just took off when I put them in.